introduce our speaker today, who is Brian Humes. He is a program officer in the political science program at NSF right now. He also is an adjunct professor of poli-sci at Georgetown and a visiting instructor at Essex Summer School in social science data analysis and collection. He oversees, as part of his NSF duties, he oversees 3 competitions each year in the political science program, but then he also does additional things such as a member of the management team for the human and social dynamics competition. His history involves, which is of interest to all of you, I would think, is that he was a faculty member at Michigan State University and also at the University of Nebraska. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, and thanks for attending this. One of the joys of this job is to talk about the dissertation awards, because when we talk to faculty members about money, they're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. When I talk to graduate students about money, I'm talking anywhere from $7,500 to about $12,000, which for a faculty member, they kind of go, what can you do with that? And what I like to say is, you can change the life of a graduate student. You can go from doing something that you wanted to do, doing something that you really wanted to do. And that's what's exciting about these awards. They really provide graduate students the opportunities to do the types of research that they really want to do on their dissertations. Well, to start out, I want you to look at this initial slide. Okay? I always start my presentation out with this slide, and I do so because I don't like the slide. Okay? But I want to illustrate why I don't like the slide. It says National Science Foundation, where discoveries begin. Okay? That's not true. Discoveries do not begin at the National Science Foundation. The National Science Foundation provides money for researchers to do their research. Now, there's some people at the National Science Foundation, in fact, a large number of program officers, who are actively doing their own research. I'm one of those. But my primary duty is to provide money to researchers, to get money from my budget out to the people who are doing the actual research, and that's where the discoveries begin. It's back here at institutions like the University of Nebraska. It's students who are going to be working on the dissertations like you that are going to be involved in the process of actually making the discoveries. So it's kind of a misnomer to talk about it that way. Okay, now the initial real slide. As I was introduced, I'm Brian Humes. I'm a program officer in the political science program. The political science program is in the Directorate for Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences at the National Science Foundation. I'm actually in a division within that directorate, and the division is the Social and Economic Sciences. There are 3 divisions within the Directorate of Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences. These are, as I said, social and economic sciences, behavioral and cognitive sciences, and then science, resources, statistics. Usually this last division I don't mention very much. Okay? It usually drops by the wayside because this is the division that runs national surveys or contracts with people to run national surveys to create things like indicators of graduate studies, that you'll see publications of where are people going in graduate school, what are they doing in graduate school, this type of thing. They're really a data gathering arm of the National Science Foundation and of the federal government. The reason that I'm bringing it up, though, to you is because for a number of students in this program, and here that are attending, if you're involved in the SRAM program especially, there are opportunities in science, resources, and statistics in dealing with the development of surveys and survey techniques that you might want to take advantage of. Most of the time I don't mention that program or that division. This time we'll highlight it a little bit as we go on. But let's talk about the other 2 main divisions. The one I'm in, the Division of Social and Economic Sciences, SES, we focus on research that looks at society, looks at the development of economic, legal, political, and social systems, organizations, and institutions. Okay. Programs within this particular division are things like political science, like sociology, like decisions, risks, and management science, law and social science. These latter two I'll talk to you in a little bit about. The division of behavioral and cognitive sciences, which is the other major division within our directorate, supports research to develop and advance scientific knowledge focusing on human cognition, language, behavior, and culture. This is the division that you'll find anthropology in, both cultural and physical. It's the division that you'll find the more psychologically based programs like perception and learning, cognitive neuroscience. It's also the area where you're going to find things like archaeology, you're going to find geography, subjects of that type. Well, this is just kind of fluff to begin with, to tell you where we're coming from. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of talking about doctoral dissertation improvement. This says awards. We actually should be talking about grants. They're one and the same, but I like to refer to them as DDIGs. Okay? These are the programs within the social, behavioral, and economic sciences that entertain doctoral dissertation improvement grant proposals. Okay? Notice that there are lots of programs in there, but the programs that might jump out at you that aren't there are those that are more psychologically based. Okay? Social psych is not there. Cognitive and neuroscience is not there. Perception and learning is not there. Okay? I do not know historically why they've decided to exclude themselves from the program, from that program or this program, but they have. So these are the programs that accept applications for doctoral dissertation improvement grants. Now, most of these programs are going to be, pretty straightforward, but I want to highlight a few of them. One is decision risk and management science. Decision risk and management science is a multidisciplinary and an interdisciplinary program that focuses on decision-making writ large. So you can have people coming in from economics programs, talking about perhaps behavioral economics. You can have individuals who are more psychologically based or social psychologically based, coming in and applying for awards. Anything that deals with decision-making falls within DRMS's call. So if you're more psychologically based, and you were kind of discouraged when you saw that list and you didn't see social psych, or you didn't see some of the other programs, if you can frame what you're doing into a decision-making framework, then you can think of sending it to DRMS. Another program that I want to mention is law and social science. Law and social science is a multidisciplinary program that looks at law and legal systems. Normally, when you think of, or when I think of studying the courts, for example, the Supreme Court, I think of proposals of that type coming to political science program. That isn't the case in NSF. They go to law and social science. But besides dealing with the standard how do justices make decisions, they also deal with research that comes from a number of different areas. For example, they receive a lot of research from social psychologists who are looking at group decision-making. So they're looking at decision-making in juries, as an example. They also see a lot of proposals coming in on identification of suspects, both eye identification of suspects, but also hearing identification of suspects, looking to see the problems, the biases in those approaches or in the techniques that are used. They see a lot of proposals coming from cultural anthropologists who are looking at legal systems across the world and looking at how laws develop or systems of laws develop in different cultures. So law and social science is a program that fits a lot of different people in a lot of different disciplines. The other two programs that I want to talk about, one is Science and Technology Survey and Statistics. That's the That's the Science Resource Statistics Division program that I especially want to mention to you. If you're doing research on surveys, development of certain types of questions or certain types of instruments, if that's where your dissertation is going to be leading you, they're a program to think about applying to. Now, if you're just going to do a survey, that's not it. Okay? That's not where you should be going. You can go to your disciplinary programs, perhaps. But if you're actually looking at the science of surveys, working in that area, this is a program for you to think about. Another program for you to think about is, perhaps, Science and Society. Science and Society is a program that's not a traditionally discipline-based program like sociology or political science. It's really an amalgam of three programs. One is ethics in science. Another is history and philosophy of science. That second program is really the closest that the NSF gets to humanities. And the third is essentially, or getting into the essentially range again. The third part of the program focuses on the role of governmental policy in science, both the effects of science on governmental policy and the effects of governmental policy on science. Looking at both of those types of issues. The other, actually, there's one program that I don't have listed here that does entertain proposals, and I don't know, I guess they're not officially listed here, is Measurement Methods and Statistics, which is a program in SES, in the Social Economic Sciences Division, that funds research on methods, and methods is writ large. It's not just quantitative or statistical methods, it can also be qualitative methods. It funds research on methods that will aid social scientists in doing their research. Well, these are programs, these are areas that you can think of applying for doctoral dissertation improvement grants. What do we need to think about? And this is a real story. What do we need to think about when we're thinking about applying for those? Well, let's start out with general concerns, general themes. First thing to realize is that when you apply, you are not the principal investigator on the award or on the proposal. Okay? Your name is not the first name that's listed on the proposal. It's your dissertation advisor. That person is the name that's listed. You're listed as the co-PI. Now, we understand that you're doing all the work. And we understand that all the money should be used by you to do that work. However, NSF wants a responsible party in that position, and so in the PI position. And so they've deemed that the dissertation advisor has to be the person that's first named. That's a technical thing, but it has to be there. If it's not there, what I would do is I would contact you and say, you need to withdraw this proposal and you need to resubmit it in proper form. Other program officers might say, sorry, you're out of luck. You incorrectly applied, the deadline's passed, I'm just going to send it back to you without review. You can try again next year. Which is not something, especially as a dissertation student, you want to do. You know, $12,000 is a lot of money for a graduate student, and the reason why it's a lot of money is because you're not getting a lot of money as it is. Okay? You probably don't want to stay in that role for very long. Yeah.
That wouldn't affect the authorship of the dissertation.
No. It should not affect the authorship of the dissertation. It should not affect the authorship of anything that comes out of the dissertation. Okay? It shouldn't. Now, the latter might be a little iffy depending on your advisor, but it shouldn't affect the dissertation itself. And did you have a question?
Oh, mine was what about the IRB proposal?
We'll get to that in a little bit. But the IRB, for our purposes, just for the type, for the purposes of who's first name, it doesn't matter to us. We just need to see an approval from an IRB that lists the project name and one of the PIs. Okay, as I have up there, the PhD candidate is the co-PI. Okay. There's no salary support allowed for the principal investigator or the co-principal investigator. Okay. Doctoral dissertation improvement grants should not be seen as a way for you to extend your graduate career. Okay. It's not a way for the institution to save money and go, oh, this person got a DDIG, we don't have to give them money this year. We can give money to somebody else. The grant is supposed to be used to help you do the research, to do things that you wouldn't be able to do under normal circumstances. Not to provide you with a year of support to do the dissertation, which you would have gotten from your institution anyway. Now, while you can't get salary support for the PI or co-PI, you can get salary support for others. So, for example, if you're doing archival research and you need somebody to help you out in doing that archival research, you can pay that person a salary. Or if you're doing, let's say, experimental research, and you can conduct a lot of the experiments yourself, but you need some help. You need some hourly labor. Okay. If that's the case, you can hire somebody to help you do that through the NSF award. Okay. You just can't funnel money directly to yourself or to your co-PI. Now there is an exception to that, which I'll mention. Okay. Something that's very important is, you know how I had that list of programs? The dates that proposals are due vary by program. This is very, very important to know. In political science, the deadline for doctoral dissertation improvement grants is January 15th. We have one competition a year, and that's it. Sociology has two competitions a year. They have a deadline in October and a deadline in February. Where do you find this information out? You go to the website. You go to www.nsf.gov. There's a little drop-down menu on your left. You go to the Social, Behavioral, and Economics Directorate. From there, you can keep drilling down to the specific programs, and it will tell you when the deadlines are. Realize that there are different times, and whichever program you're planning on applying to, take that into consideration. Word of warning, major word of warning. When you apply for an NSF grant, you're going to be applying through, most of you will be applying through FAFSA, which is a computer program that we have set up to accept proposals. You'll get access to it through your office's sponsored programs. Now, when you send in your proposal, it does not come to me. It goes to your office's sponsored programs. They have to check it over. They have to sign it off. They click on it, and then it's sent to me. The deadline, the January 15th deadline, for example, is the deadline for your office's sponsored programs to get the proposal to me. What that means is you need to coordinate with your office's sponsored programs. You need to talk to them to see when they need to get a proposal in order for you to make the deadline. That's very important. Let me give you an example. My first year at NSF, I had a doctoral dissertation proposal that came in about 3 weeks late. And now I'm willing to give you I have some flexibility in my deadline. It's actually called a target date. So technically, if a proposal comes in late, I can choose whether to accept it or not. And what I tell people, and what I'm telling you now, is if you think your proposal might be in late, you should contact the program officer, A, see if it's okay, and B, get his or her approval for that coming in late. Now, I'll usually give people an extra week or so, because I realize things come up. Well, this proposal shows up 3 weeks late, and the student hasn't talked to me at all. Hasn't said boo to me about it coming in late. So I immediately email him, email his advisor, and say, I'm sorry, I can't accept this. You will either have to return it without review, you'll either have to have me return it without review, or you're going to have to withdraw the proposal. We can't accept it because you're 3 weeks late. Now, this student was at, a school, a small school in the Northeast that doesn't accept or doesn't receive very many federal dollars, so maybe that was the problem. He immediately sent me an email that showed when he had submitted the proposal to the Office of Sponsored Programs, he had submitted the proposal about 2 weeks ahead of the date. It took them 5 weeks to process his proposal. Okay? He emailed me all the interactions, how they were just overwhelmed and they weren't getting things done, And so I said, okay, I'll let you come in this case, but, told the advisor in no uncertain terms that you need to make sure this doesn't happen again. Now, where was this person applying from? Well, like I said, a small institution in the Northeast. You might have heard of it. It's called MIT. And they don't do too much with federal money, right? They don't get very many proposals coming through there. It happens. Okay? And it's best to talk to your Office of Sponsored Programs early on, because they can tell you, look, if you get it to us by this day, we can make sure it gets in. Now, like I said, we have some flexibility. Some program officers don't like to use that flexibility. They will tell you that if your proposal comes in late, they will turn it down. They'll send it back to you without review. With the doctoral dissertation competition, we don't absolutely have to do that. But in other competitions at NSF, we do. Instead of having target dates, we have deadlines, and we can't accept any late proposals. Human and social dynamics, which I'm on the management team for, if you have a proposal that comes in an hour late, we can't accept it. We have to send it back to you without review, because that's the rules of that particular competition. So don't let that happen, because there's nothing worse, from my perspective, than having to turn something down for a reason like that. I'd rather let it go through the process. At least you get some good feedback that way if you don't get to award. The amount of funding varies by program. Once again, you can find that in the solicitation for the competition or on the separate programs' websites. They'll tell you how much you can apply for. In political science, you can apply for up to $12,000. Now, just so you know, that entire $12,000 can be used for your research. Unlike other NSF grants that have overhead, that is where your institution takes a cut of the money up front. In this case, all the money is used for research. None of it can be used for overhead. The length of the proposal also varies by program. Political science, we limit you to 10 pages. Other programs will limit you to 15 pages. When I say 10 pages and 15 pages, what I mean is the length of your project description, which is where you tell us what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, and what's the major contribution. Okay? That does not include references. A lot of times, people will say, well, does that include references? So I should probably keep my bibliography as short as possible. No, it doesn't include references. All it includes is, the bibliography is another piece that comes in there. One thing that's very important that sometimes students get tripped up on is there's no citizenship requirement for applying for doctoral dissertation improvement grants. There's no citizenship requirement for applying for NSF awards, period, as long as you're at a U.S. institution. The only requirement as far as citizenship in a broad sense is that you have to be a PhD student at a U.S. institution to apply successfully for a DDIG. So if you're a U.S. citizen and you're over, let's say at the University of Essex in England, you can't apply. But if you're a citizen of some other country, if you're a citizen of Great Britain, and you're here at the University of Nebraska, and you can apply for a doctoral dissertation if that ever comes up, citizenship doesn't matter for these things. Big one, very big one. When you apply, you do not have to have human subjects approval if you're involving human subjects in your research. However, before an award can be processed, we have to have human subjects approval. It has to go through the IRB process at your institution. Okay? We cannot start the recommendation process without documentation of that. This is very, very important. The reason it's very important is because the timing of the cycles. Think about if you apply in January. Say you're applying for a political science dissertation award. You apply in January. Deadline's January 15th. We get it. We'll be making recommendations after we get reviews and everything. We'll be making recommendations in April or May. What happens at universities in April and May? It's about finals time. It's about time for people thinking about, hey, this is my chance to get off campus and maybe do research at other locations. Okay? People tend to disappear in the summer. Okay? Problem with that is sometimes it's difficult to get an IRB together to actually consider proposals. Well, why is that a problem? It's a problem because at NSF, we live on the federal fiscal year, which runs from October 1st to September 30th. Okay. Also, if you think of NSF, our role is to provide researchers with money. So we're providing awards throughout the year. We have to have all our money spent out by the end of September. The whole foundation does. So our Division of Grants and Administration, which does the money side of it, they get flooded by proposals at the end of the year. So what they tell us is that they want everything into them by August 1st or by August 15th, something like that. If we tell you in May, we're going to recommend you for an award, but you have to have IRB approval. If you haven't started the process yet, you spend a few weeks putting everything together, making sure you've got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. You send it to the board. The board sits on it for a month before they finally meet if they have a quorum. They come back at you and they want a revision or two. So you go back to them in July, you better hope and pray that it comes through. The reason being is that, if we're sitting there and we're going, it's the middle of July, we don't have this IRB in, we don't want to lose these funds. Because the worst thing that we can do is go to our division director crying for more money all the time, and then leave money on the table at the end of the fiscal year. What we'll do is we'll just contact them and say, we're sorry, but we have to withdraw the recommendation. We have to fund somebody else. Do you think we like to do that? No, we don't. So what's the moral of the story? I know it's a pain. I know that dealing with IRBs is not high up on your list of things to do. Or if it is, you might want to talk to the programs that don't fund Doctoral Dissertation Improvement Grants, the psychologically based programs. They may be able to help you out a little bit. Okay. Most places, IRB approval is not something that you want to go through lightly. But I would recommend that you put in your application soon after you put in your proposal, just in case. I know it's a pain, but it's much better than getting an award yanked at the last minute. And it does happen. Okay? And it doesn't just happen to graduate students. I've known cases where it's happened to faculty members. Faculty members at major institutions have lost awards because they haven't gotten IRB approval. Okay. That's probably enough about IRB. But that also answers the question about whose name needs to be on it. As long as it's the PI or the co-PI, it doesn't matter. As long as the title has something to do with it. That's all that really matters to us, but we gotta have the ingredient. Okay. Well, how do you go about developing your proposal? Okay. What sort of things do you need to think about? First, you need to figure out, what do I actually want to do research on? Now, I know that seems kind of trite. I've had 2 NSF grants. My first NSF grant, I loved. This is something that I got in the 90s. Wow, a long time ago, in 92, soon after I started at the University of Nebraska. And I loved doing that research. I'm still working on some of it. Okay, it's just been a lifelong activity for me to a certain extent. Okay, I'm still doing research in the area. It was fun doing the data collection that I did. It was fun working with graduate students who were doing the data collection. I loved it. The second one, let's just say it wasn't as pleasant of an experience. I got on this award, or got on this proposal, somebody, as a favor to somebody. They were collecting a massive data set. They said, you really have the tools to do this. You've done this type of historical research before. Will you help us out? And against my better judgment, I agreed. And I hated it. You should think about that as you're choosing your dissertation topic, and as you're thinking about what you're going to do. Okay? There are lots of topics out there that are real interesting to people, and they may really excite the field. But if they don't excite you, forget it. Dissertations are hard enough to get through, as it is. That's why there are so many people out there who are not PhDs but have the other 3 letters, ABD. Okay? Don't let that happen. Part of that is saying, what do I want to do? What do I want to do with my life? Well, after you've kind of got an idea of what you want to do, start developing your idea. Now, I have here, survey the literature. That's important in so many dimensions. First of all, you never want to get a proposal back that 2 or 3 reviewers go, great proposal, well written, well developed. It's too bad the person hasn't been reading the literature over the last 5 years. They would have realized it's already been done. Okay? I've seen that happen. Okay? That isn't pleasant to see. Okay? So you need to make sure that other people haven't done what you're planning to do. Or if they have, you have an interesting twist to it. There's something that differentiates what you're doing from what they did. So you need to make sure that you do that. Okay? You also need to make sure that as you're writing up your proposal, you're citing the relevant literature, which is another reason to survey the literature. One of the easiest things, whenever people review proposals, they're looking, or review articles, they're looking for things to criticize. One of the easiest things for them to criticize is, oh, this person forgot to cite so-and-so. And this is a major work in the area, so it really makes me wonder whether they have a grasp of what's going on here. Okay? Don't let that happen. Okay? And that's why you want to survey the literature. Prepare a brief concept paper. Write up a page or 2 about what you're going to do and why you're doing it. 1, this will make it more concrete in your mind of what you're doing. 2, it's something you can share. You can show it to colleagues. You can show it to mentors. I'll tell you a secret. You can show it to program officers. Contact the program officer that you think, of the program officer who heads the program that you're thinking about applying to. Say, I have a couple of pages. Would you be willing to look it over? 99.9% of the time, they will be willing to look it over. We don't have time to read proposals. I get over, in my particular program alone, I get between 300 and 350 proposals a year. I just don't have time to look over rough drafts of each of those, provide everybody with comments, and do the rest of my job. But I'm more than willing to look at 1 to 2 pages and give you comments on those pages and also say, here are some things that you need to worry about. For example, just one to throw out. If you're doing a comparative study that's involving more than one country, tell me why you chose the countries you did. You probably have a reason for doing it. You didn't just look at the map, pull out a dart or a set of darts, cover your eyes and throw them. Okay? You have a particular reason for choosing those cases. Tell me why. If you don't, I will guarantee that my reviewers will say, they have no justification of their cases. Don't let that happen. That's a simple one. And those are the types of things that we can point out. As you prepare to do the project itself, yeah.
How early in the process should that be submitted to a program officer?
Well, I mean, it partially depends on your timeline. You know, I would say anywhere between 6 months and 2 months. The reason I come out on 2 months is because you want to have time to actually use the information. So depending on how busy your schedule is and how busy your office's sponsored programs can turn things, how quickly they can turn things around, that time may want to change. But you really want to leave yourself enough time in order to change the proposal if need be. You know, there's nothing worse than somebody sending me something at the beginning of January, and I come back with a whole bunch of changes, and they look at it and they go, "There's no way I can get this done by January 15th." So give yourself good lead time. And you know, as far as the out in the beginning, the limit in the beginning, they're really, I don't know why I said 6 months. Okay, you can come in any time, but it's probably, you know, when you want to start getting serious about it. As you're preparing to do the project itself, as you're preparing to actually set up the proposal, you need to ask yourself some questions. One of the main questions you need to ask is, what sort of resources do you have available here at your institution that you can rely on to help you conduct this research? For example, if you're doing experimental research, are there experimental labs on campus that you can use? If you're doing experimental research and you want to do it off campus, are there mechanisms, are there tools that you can use from campus to do that research? Is there a mobile experimental laboratory that you can take out to somewhere in western Nebraska, let's say, and run your experiments? If you're doing survey research, are there companies on campus, are there groups on campus that you can work with directly? Or do you have to contract everything outside of campus? Start asking yourself that question. A very simple one, and this is kind of silly in some ways, but we run into it, is do you have the statistical software to do the analysis that you want? Some institutions just provide this stuff willy-nilly to graduate students. Other institutions don't have the resources to do that. So you need to ask yourself, what do I have? What's available? You need to ask yourself, what do I need? Realistically, if I'm going to do this research, what do I need? Now, I would rather, and this is more for full grants than dissertations, because quite frankly, graduate students always find a way to spend $12,000 or $7,500 or something. But I would ask myself, I would err on the notion of being large than being small. Because it's always the case, we rarely cut dissertation awards. And if we do, okay, that is, when I say cut them, I mean reduce their budgets. And if we do, we'll do it in consultation with you. Contact you and say, look, do you really need this? Are you sure your institution can't give you this? But it's much better to be in that situation. We're not going to turn you down because we think the budget is out of line. It's much better to be in that situation than to start the project after you've received an award and go, I can't do what I want to do. You know, you're doing experimental stuff, you set it up to get your assistant, you've rented laboratory space, and then you suddenly realized, oh, I don't have anything to pay the subjects with. Well, I guess I'll use my undergraduates in my class, which people have been doing since the beginning of time. There are slight problems with that. Okay? Think big and ask yourself, what do I really need? And be really realistic about it. It helps if you develop preliminary data. Okay? That helps in so many ways. One, it provides evidence to people looking over the proposal saying, this person actually has a handle on what they're doing. Okay? They know where to get this data. Okay? They know what's going to happen. That is, they know the difficulties involved. It'll also give you an idea of what the actual costs involved are. Okay? It's real easy to run up these numbers in your head, but when you get into it and you see, oh, okay, well, I have to rent this lab, and the first time I rent it, only 2 students showed up, and I needed a minimum of 4. So I didn't get any data this time, and I still had to pay the lab fee. I still had to pay the assistants that I hired. Okay? You start taking those things into consideration, and that's important to do. Present your ideas and your preliminary research to your colleagues, to your mentors, to your students. Talk to people who've received NSF grants, both at the dissertation level and elsewhere, or other types of grants. They can talk to you about things that you might want to consider. They can also kind of listen to what you're presenting and say, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? Have you thought about that problem, etc. The more vetting that you have done at this level, the less you'll have to worry about when it comes to my level. Because you would have reacted to most of the major questions. For some reason, some people have pictures of academics as individuals who go off to the library carrels and emerge every once in a while, go off to their offices and emerge every once in a while to the light, kind of scurry around for food and drink, and then go back to their offices. Okay? That should not be the way it is. Okay? You should be part of a community. You need to use that community as you're developing your idea and as you're working on your proposal. You need to think about what the possible funding sources are. Okay? I listed a bunch of programs that you could think of applying to at NSF. Of course, there are lots of other funding agencies besides NSF. You need to think about where the money might be and what's most appropriate for you. Where do you get an idea of where the money might be? Any idea? We can look to see where your advisor has gotten money, where people similar to your advisor have gotten money. Look at their vitas. Okay? That's an easy place to find information. Go to your office of sponsored programs. Outline to them, this is the type of research I'm doing. Can you help me on identifying funding sources? Okay. You also have to understand the ground rules, and this is very important. For example, at the National Science Foundation, a lot of the programs I list will co-review dissertations. What that means is that you submit a proposal to one program, you ask that it be considered by another program, and there'll be some sharing going on, and if both programs agree, both programs will consider your dissertation proposal. Okay? This really isn't double jeopardy. Don't think of it that way. Okay? It's really 2 chances at the apple. But some programs don't allow that. Also, a big no-no that happens with dissertation students more than other people applying is you cannot apply to 2 programs with the same proposal. Physically, you can't. Fastlane will kick it out. Okay? Now, all you have to do is change the title. But if you do that and you catch it, you're in trouble. So don't do it. But that's part of reading the description of the program, reading the solicitation, finding out what needs to be there. Okay? Determine whether your project fits the program. How do you do that? Look to see what the program's funded in the past. Okay, you can go to www.nsf.gov. There's a little tab at the top of the page for awards. You can search by program, you can search by keywords, and you can get a list. Another thing to do is to talk to the program officer. For example, if you look at political science, and you look at our awards, dissertation and full awards, you will notice that we do not fund qualitative research. It's there plain and simple. Even though I've been walking around for the last 2 years telling people we want to fund qualitative research. What's the disconnect? The disconnect is that people out there have an idea that NSF doesn't fund this type of research, so they don't apply to NSF. If they don't apply to NSF, we don't fund it, and then they look at the awards and say, see, they don't fund any qualitative research. Okay? So talk to the program officer. The program officer can tell you whether it's appropriate or not. And we're more than willing to talk to you. Send us an email. Okay. Look over prior award abstracts. I mentioned where you can find those. Okay. Find out how they're going to be evaluated. In just a few minutes, I'll talk to you about how they're evaluated at NSF. But it's really important to find out what are they looking for? How will things be done? And once again, talk with the program officer. Even if you're not applying to NSF, if you're applying to some other funding agency, talk to the relevant person in charge. They can tell you whether you're on the right track or not. They can tell you what pitfalls there are. That's what we're here for. Now, some of us like to do it more than others, but we'll all do it. You need, as I have there, to coordinate with your institution and your sponsored research office. Make sure that you're applying in time, that you're getting all the relevant information to them in time for them to deal with it. Because they'll do things like they'll look through your budget, make sure that your budget's okay. And if your budget's not okay, they'll come back to you and ask you to revise it. You need to build in time for that. If you're really curious, you can ask PIs for copies of their proposals. That is, people who have gotten awards in the past. You can ask them for, what could you send me a copy of your proposal? A lot of PIs will, even people who got dissertation fellowships or dissertation research awards. They will provide you with copies. Do not contact your program officer because it's very difficult for us to get you those, and two, after we get them for you, you will get something that has a bunch of lines redacted because it has to go through our Office of General Counsel so they can knock anything out that they think might be private information. Okay? You can do it Freedom of Information Act request. We'd rather you not do that. You'll get the same sort of thing. You'll find that you'll get quicker turnaround and more information if you talk to people who've received awards. They're more than willing to share for the most part. Okay, budget tips. Be realistic. What do I need money for? Do I really need a laptop computer, or do I just want one? Well, if you're doing field research, you probably need a laptop computer. If you're analyzing secondary data, probably not. It'd be nice to have, but you probably don't need it. Okay. By the way, I said there was an exception to salary. If you're doing field research, you can get money for travel to the location, whether it's international or within the States. You can also get per diem, both food and lodging while you're away from your institution. That's not considered salary. And you can get money for that through the budget. Make sure, and this isn't as important for dissertation students just because we're talking about smaller numbers, but it's still important. Make sure that your budget is well justified. There's a place in the proposal called the budget description where it's a 3-page maximum right after the budget, and you can explain line by line. Tell us what you need that money for. Why do you need 400 pencils? Is there a specific reason you need those pencils? Well, tell us. Because what that does is, if we're thinking of cutting your budget, it becomes a lot harder to cut your budget if things are justified. Now, make sure you're in line with program guidelines with your budget. How do you know that? Talk to the program officer. And you'd be surprised what we find. My favorite funding story happened to me where last year I had a student who, from Indiana, who had applied for a DTIG to do some field work in Uganda. And she got some money to go to Uganda before we made our decision. She came back, I informed her that we were recommending her for an award, and she said, "Is it possible to change my budget?" I said, "Well, what's going on?" And she said, "Well, if you notice, most of my budget is for renting a car and hiring a driver. After going to Uganda, I realized that it's cheaper for me to buy a car and hire a more knowledgeable driver. Would that be permissible?" So I contacted my Division of Grants and Administration. They got back to me right away and they said there's nothing in our rules that prohibit it. They should check with their Office of Sponsored Programs to make sure it's okay with them. They checked with the Office of Sponsored Programs. It was fine by them. And so Indiana University is now the proud owner of a car in Uganda. So there are lots of things that money can be used for. But this brings up another important thing. And that is, I have here personnel, eligible cost, personnel, equipment. Realize, any equipment bought with your grant does not belong to you. Okay? It belongs to your university. Because technically that money never comes to you. It comes to your university, and the university disperses it. Okay? Some universities, well, actually most universities, don't care what graduate students do with their equipment. But that's something that is up to the university. My experience with UNL is if you're continuing to do the research, they're fine with you taking the equipment with you. But that can change. So you might want to check just to make sure. As I said, you can support travel. One word with travel. When you go to budget travel, make sure you're budgeting travel on U.S. carrier as much as possible. If there's a U.S. carrier flying to the location, you have to take it, which may affect how much you have to budget for your ticket. For example, for me, when I do international travel for NSF, I have to do a U.S. carrier. When I teach at the Essex program in the summer, I don't have to use a U.S. carrier. So I go on Virgin because it's a cheaper rate. So but realize that you won't have that option. And so that can affect how you budget things. There are no indirect costs on doctoral dissertation improvement grants. You don't have to worry about the university taking its cut. However, one thing you should realize or you can note is if you do subawards, for example, you want to conduct a survey and you're contracting out to a survey firm to actually conduct the survey for you, you need to provide us with a budget from that company. Usually they'll provide you with, if nothing else, a letter breaking down the costs. We need that before we can process it. Yeah, the proposal. Well, we can process the proposal, that is, we can go through the review process. But if we go to recommend an award, we have to have it in place. Okay, review criteria. We're just going to deal with the top one because the bottom one isn't as important for the doctoral dissertation improvement grants. It is important, but it's not as. And that is, we're going to be looking at intellectual merit. We're going to say, how important is this question? What are the person's qualifications? This is very important. In political science, one way to get that information is we require a letter from your dissertation advisor telling us that you're capable of doing the dissertation, of doing the work that's needed to complete the dissertation. That's important to know and to have. How creative, how original is it? Okay. The conception and organization, And do you have the access to the resources you need, or can you get access? Are we going to be providing you access through this particular award? One thing to remember, one major thing to remember, is when we look at qualifications, one thing that comes through with qualifications is how well is your proposal organized? How well is it written? Does it look like it's slapped together at the last minute? That can have an impact. This last year, my panel discussed a proposal for about a half an hour. Most discussions are about 10 minutes. Most of the discussion was not on whether this was interesting, path-breaking research. They all agreed on that. What they were concerned about was they were concerned about all the typos in the proposal. Why should that matter? Well, if there's a bunch of typos in the proposal, the question is how careful will the person be doing the research? And that's really important. They ended up recommending an award, but it was close. It was real close. And if this proposal had been written the way it was supposed to have been written, they would have discussed it for 5 minutes and thrown it in the must fund category. And if they had ever revisited it again, it would have been, make sure it's at the top of that category. So don't let that happen. You don't have to have it happen. Don't let it happen. Okay, we're almost there. Let's talk about the proposal guide timeline, how this works. You send it to us, you give it to your Office of Sponsored Programs, they send it to us. What happens to it? Well, we look over it. If everything is there that's supposed to be there, and nothing is there that's not supposed to be there, we'll go ahead and start the review process. If something's amiss, if some document is missing, okay, or something's too long, or something like that, we have a choice to make. We can either return it to you saying it's inappropriate for review, or ask you to withdraw it. Okay. Or we can ask you to make changes. I'm the type of program officer that will give you a chance to make changes. Okay. I really want to make sure that you get a fair shake at this. There are other program officers who don't believe that. They believe, hey, everything's out there in black and white. If you don't have things submitted correctly, that's your fault. Don't let it happen. The moral of the story is make sure everything is coming in the way it's supposed to come in. Let's say it is going to be reviewed. There are essentially 3 ways things can be reviewed at NSF. They can either be reviewed all by panel, they can be reviewed just by ad hoc reviewers, or they can be reviewed by both. What do I mean by panel? Panel is anywhere from 8 to 15 scholars brought in from around the nation who represent the field. In political science, I have 12 people on my dissertation panel. Some of them do international relations, some of them do political psychology, some do voting behavior, some do institutions, some do comparative politics, some do methods. Most of them do a mixture of some of those. And they're all fairly active associate professors. We usually get people at the associate range to be on the dissertation panel. Widely known, if you knew who was on the panel, you wouldn't be surprised if you're in political science. Okay? But we don't give you that information. In political science, we only do panel reviews. So what that means is when the proposals come in, after we've gotten all the proposals from the January 15th deadline, we will assign each proposal to 3 individuals. Okay? 3 of our panelists. Now this is where your biographical sketch becomes important, because we'll be looking, and that of your advisor, we'll be looking for any conflicts of interest and making sure the proposal doesn't go to somebody who technically can't review it. Other programs, for example, sociology, does both panel review and they also do ad hoc reviews. So they'll send it out to 6 ad hoc reviewers. That is, people from around the nation who are specialists in this area. Now, it's important to find out if it's only going to be panel only or if it's going to be a mixture. Why? Because you have the opportunity to provide names of people to review your proposal and to provide names of people not to review your proposal. Now the latter category, I would keep the list very small. If we get a 4-page list of names of people not to review your proposal, we wonder what's up. And that occasionally happens. But if you give us a few names and you tell us why, that's okay. What's really important for you is the people you list as you wanting to review the proposal. Most programs will take a couple of names off that list as reviewers. It also helps shape who they're looking at for reviewers. So you're setting a frame. You're sending a signal. This is what my proposal's about. And by sending that signal, you're kind of funneling them in a certain direction for choosing reviewers. And that's important to do. Okay? Another thing that's important to do is in each proposal, besides the project description, which is a 10 to 15 page description of your project, you also have a 1-page project summary. Craft that. Work on it. Don't dash it out, because it's kind of an abstract. Don't dash it out at the last minute. Why? We don't have time to read everything. I mentioned this before. We don't have time to read all these proposals. I'd love to, but I really don't. Okay, I read some, but not all. When I go, or when a program officer goes to select reviewers, one of the first places they go is to that summary. If that summary is well written and gets to the point, we can make sure you get the reviewers that you deserve. If we don't know what you're doing after we've read it, or you've misled us about what you're doing, you're not going to get the reviewers that you deserve for that project. So don't let that happen. So you can see the process, both with the summary and also with suggesting reviewers. And by the way, the reviewers do not have to just come from the United States. If you're doing, let's say, some comparative survey work, and you think there's somebody in England or there's somebody in Belgium who would be great to review the proposal, suggest it. We use reviewers outside the United States all the time. There's no reason we can't do it here. Okay. Well, these reviews come in. Yeah.
This list that you write, is that only with the ad hoc?
Yeah, that's only with the ad hoc. The panelists are chosen well in advance, just to be able to make sure that we get people
That
in.
makes sense.
What happens next? Well, the panel meets, okay, usually in November, if you submitted in the fall, if there's a fall competition, November, early December. If it's a spring competition, usually in April. The panel meets, the panel discusses your proposal, and the panel will make a recommendation. In political science, they put the proposal either in the must fund, the fund, or the do not fund categories. We as program officers listen to this discussion, we read all the reviews, and we make a recommendation to our division director. Most of the time, we're going to be following what the panel recommends. But that isn't always the case. There have been cases that I've overturned things, okay, where I just believe that something went wrong in the panel discussion. The proposal wasn't treated correctly. And I've done that both for things that were placed in the do not fund category. I've done that for things placed in the must fund category. I'll tell you, it's a lot funner, or a lot more enjoyable, talking to PIs, telling them that I'm recommending you for funding, and then they contact you later and say, but the panel didn't recommend. Well, don't worry about that. Okay? They become your friends for life. People on the other side aren't too thrilled about it. But it happens. It happens. Okay? If you're declined, okay, by the panel or by me, okay, well, or actually by me, if I recommend that a decline, or an award, I guess I should say, my recommendation goes to the division director. The division director makes the ultimate decision, so to speak. I've never been overturned as a program officer. Occasionally things do happen, program officers do you get overturned. I haven't had that happen. If you're declined, you will get back a panel summary, which is a summary of the discussion of the panel, and you will get back copies of the reviews of your proposal. Now, the reviews that you get back will not identify who the reviewer was. Okay, those are anonymous reviews. But they'll give you an idea of what happened to your proposal. If you have any question about what occurred, what should you do? Call your program officer. This is especially the case if, let's say, you applied early in the process. Let's say you applied in the spring of your third year, and you get turned down. And you're going, you know, the way it looks, I'm going to be here for 5 years. You could come back, depending on the program, you know, if they have more than one deadline, you could come back in the fall of that next year. Talk to your program officer and say, what happened? You know, read the panel summary, read the reviews, talk to them and say, I think this is the problem. And they'll tell you whether they agree or not. It might be that you've pointed out something that they go, oh, don't worry about that. That wasn't important. That was one panelist who kept hitting on that point and nobody else cared. Okay? But this is what's crucial. This is what needs to be changed. And we're more than willing to do that. And that's just the second point with that. Don't be afraid to resubmit, to send in a proposal again after you've revised it, to do a revise and resubmit. We don't formally have a revise and resubmit category at NSF. And I know with dissertations it's kind of hard because of the timing. But if you have the opportunity, take advantage of it. Really do. Well, what happens next? Well, if an award is recommended, it goes to the Division of Grants and Administration. Those are the budget people who look it over, make sure that all the budget lines are correct. If something's wrong, they'll contact us and we'll contact you and you'll have to make a revision, okay, which is okay. That happens occasionally. And after they've signed off on it, your organization, that is your institution, your university, is notified that an award is made. Now, just to iterate again, the money comes to your institution. We don't give you a $12,000 check and say, have fun. The money comes to your institution. Okay? You aren't even notified that the institution has received that money by NSF, unless you apply to my program, in which case, when I'm notified, I send you an email saying, hey, congratulations, the money's now available. Because some universities don't bother telling you that, which is kind of irritating. Okay? One thing to remember is to look at the timeline here. For political science, we try to get everything done. Once you've submitted your proposal, we try to get everything out the door within between 5 and 6 months. Everything. But realize it can take up to 7 months or more. You know, when DGA is really busy in the summer, they say 6 to 8 weeks on a proposal, not 30 days. So if you're applying in January, don't expect money in February. I've had dissertation students do that, where they call me up and say, you know, February 1, have you guys made decisions yet? It's like, yeah, we have. We decided which panelists to send your proposal to. Realize that if you apply in January, realistically, you're looking at getting money in July or August. And so you should make plans accordingly. And now we're back to the slide that I had. Any questions?
You said that deadlines vary by program, but are they, within the program, are they fairly the same year to year? So if you're like 3 years out, you can look now to sort of begin to get an idea of what you do.
Yeah, occasionally they'll change. Like sociology used to be August 15th and January 15th, and they've now changed to October and February. But for the most part, they're going to stay the same. Yeah.
How do you get funded, like from your programs?
Okay. In political science, just as an example, in political science, we've traditionally funded about 50% 15 to 18%. I've been trying to get that number up, and this year we were right around, we're between 25 and 30. And that's pretty good when you think of probably about 20% of the proposals we have, well, between 10 and 20% of the proposals we have are proposals that just don't have a chance. So you're anywhere from 1 in 3 to 1 in 2 chances if you write a good proposal. And I think across the directorate, the funding rate is probably around 25%. A lot better odds than submitting to a journal. Other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned withdrawing applications and also you said return without review. What's the difference between those two?
It's really just it's just a formal difference. If we'll give you a lot of times program officers will give you the option. If you withdraw it, that just means that for whatever reason you decided that you didn't want to have it reviewed. Whereas if it's returned without review, it's actually rejected. So, if you want to keep your batting average up, you might say, oh, my hamstring, I can't bat. That would be the I like to give, if I'm in a place where I have to do that, I like to give the person an option, because if it goes returned without review, it has to go to the division director, and the division director signs off on it, and you actually formally do get a rejection letter. And I just think that adds insult to the truth.
My question was about the time frame. How soon can I apply? Because I'm a second year now, and I have to do a master's type project and then the doctorate. But the master's will feed into the dissertation. So I don't know if I could get funded for that, since it's the same thing to that goal.
Probably not, because we're looking at just the PhD project, and so you've got to be at a situation where your advisor can say he's working on his dissertation.
How much time do you have to spend the money once it's awarded? Like you have to disperse it by the end of the budget year, but you have to use it all up in a fiscal year or something like that.
Okay, formally, dissertation awards last for 12 months. So formally, you have to have all the money spent within 12 months. However, there are what are called no-cost extensions, which are essentially allow you to continue spending money for an extended period of time. With doctoral dissertation awards, just like with any other NSF grant, the first no-cost extension comes from your institution. So you go to your office of sponsored programs, you say, I'm not going to be able to complete this project for X, Y, and Z reasons. They have you write something up, submit it in Fastlane, they okay it, it comes to me, I review it, and that takes care of it. For, let's say, they can ask for up to a year. So that will take care of it for up to a year. If you need another year after that, then you can ask for another no-cost extension. But that has to be approved both by your office-sponsored programs here, and it has to be approved by NSF, which means it comes to me, I have to approve it, and the people in DGA have to approve it. Most of the time, there's no sweat on those, but I wouldn't try to go beyond 2 years. 2 extra years. Otherwise, about one, you probably won't get your project done. You're probably reaching other deadlines. So, yeah.
So our budget should try and fit the 1 year span, and that would just be a just in case thing.
Right, just it should, because the idea is that you should be getting done with your program, and so it should fit within that. Yeah.
How about the application process for the field of engineering?
For what?
For the field of engineering.
I'm sorry. Oh, engineering?
Yeah, engineering.
I tried to find something on the website about that, and I couldn't find anything about doctoral dissertation support in engineering. So the best I can do right now is tell you to contact the program officer at NSF in charge of your particular type of engineering and see what they can tell you about support. They may have a different name for it or something like that. And so I would contact them and see. Yeah?
I've done a search at the NSF site for different programs, and there are a lot of things available for engineering. And I don't know that they're exactly dissertation specific, but there are a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I'm sure they have something, but just under a name that I just wasn't familiar with. But I would definitely contact the engineering firm. Normally I would have done that, but the people that I know in engineering have just rotated out of the program, and I haven't made new acquaintances yet. There's a question over here.
That was me. Can you find out who's on the review panel
No,
for no programs?
for no programs.
Okay.
You can't, well, I should take that back. What we try to do is we try to keep our review panels anonymous, just so that these people aren't facing any untoward pressures. Now, we eventually put the names out. And so you can look, for example, you can look on the political science website, and we have a list of past panelists, both dissertation and regular panel. Now, we haphazardly update this. That is, we'll wait for, let's say, 4 years, and we'll throw a bunch of names on it. Some of them will actually be people who are panelists within the last 4 years. Some of them were panelists before then. Just so nobody tries to play a game and say, so they can buttonhole them in conferences and say, you're the one. Or, I can't believe you gave money to that person. Because that happens to me. And we as program officers are paid to take the heat, but we don't want our volunteers to take the heat. Other questions? Yeah.
If you're planning to conduct some focus groups abroad, say in Mexico, for instance, and I need to give incentives to the participants, should I need to present some sort of receipts or something like that to the NSF to kind of prove or show that I spend money on incentives or how I usually handle that?
What you would want to do is you would want to talk to your office of sponsored programs, because they're in charge of assuring, if there's ever an audit or anything, they're in charge of assuring NSF that the money was spent properly. So you need to check with your office of sponsored programs and see what do they need from you in order to do that. And different OSPs act in different ways. But that's the main thing. It's not something that we have. You don't have to contact us and say, what are your reports? We don't have. Any other questions?
Anybody else have any questions? All right, well, thank you very much for And I also wanted to mention that if anybody is interested in pursuing writing a proposal, that the SSP Corps would be happy to help. And there's lots of different aspects that we can help with. We can actually help you write a proposal, review it, and give you some feedback on the actual proposal. We also, Brian mentioned some questions that you want to ask yourself about UNL resources and things like that, like you mentioned, whether or not there are facilities on campus that can help you with some of your research needs. And so we can actually help identify some of those resources for you and connect you with whoever it is that you need to carry out your research. And the same with, we can help you. You mentioned that you might want to have some pilot data or something to show that you know what you're doing, and so we'd be happy to help with some of that. Identify where you can maybe get some smaller resources to do that. And then you can write a proposal for an actual NSF dissertation. Well, I just handed out the evaluations, and I'm very appreciative if you'd be willing to fill those out. You can just leave them on the back table or give them to me. Thank you very much.